Professor, push back on that. Yes, comma, maybe, that Democrats are using what they can to go after Trump. But this extension of the idea that they picked him and then found the wrongs, I disagree with. He gave them the wrongs. They decided to motivate investigations and now a prosecution on the basis of those wrongs. But the idea that he never did anything wrong, isn't that way too far?
It is, but before we get to that, I have to make one point about your otherwise excellent commentary. You should not be including democratically elected Benjamin Netanyahu among autocrats and strong men. He won his election. He tried to implement a campaign pledge, which I disagree with. I spoke to him about it. I spoke to him yesterday. He's trying very hard to come up with a compromise. He's not an autocrat. He's a Democrat. Now, back to your question. On your question, I agree with you. Trump has always given them things to go after him on. He's done much wrong, much of which I fundamentally disagree with. His speech on January 6th, his comment on the telephone, his holding classified material. But none of this would be the basis for a criminal prosecution of this kind unless the prosecutors had run on a campaign of Get Trump. My book does not have an original title. It comes from the campaign promise of Letitia James and Bragg, and no politician should ever run on a campaign of getting anybody. Even the Bible says, don't recognize faces when you prosecute. You never target people, even if they give you enough to then prosecute them on. That doesn't mean he's above the law. That means equal application of the law, not necessarily in theory, but in practice. If people who sign NDAs and then put them in the books as legal fees are never prosecuted, you can't just prosecute this guy and say, nobody's above the law. That's equal justice. That's not equal justice.
Jim, isn't this exactly what the former president was always asking for his opponents? Lock her up, go after this guy, go after Biden, go after the Democrats, go after this, congressman, that congressman, Schiff. Isn't this what he's always asking for?
Yeah, that is right. That is right, Chris. I mean, we heard the chants at the various conventions, no doubt about it. But I think the important thing here is that there was a grand jury that thought there was a reasonable amount of evidence that a particular crime had occurred. And look, that grand jury isn't the group that really has to live with this at the end of the day. It's Alvin Bragg, right? And he's going to have to stand behind this. And he brought this case at a time when New York is having a serious crime issue. These types of cases take a ton of resources from DA's offices, and they have to, and prosecutorial, you said it earlier, prosecutorial discretion. He used his discretion to take the office resources to prosecute this case. Now he has to win it, or he's going to suffer those consequences.
We're hearing reporting, even though it's under seal, that goes to the political part of this aspect, that there is a felony count in there, Professor. What are your expectations about what this case ultimately is about?
First of all, why are we hearing about leaks and Bragg isn't investigating whether the leaks come from his office, the grand jury? It's a 5-year felony if any of this happened. Here's a crime being committed right under his nose that he's not prioritizing for prosecution. Instead, we're waiting to see what the indictment says. Look, the indictment will be stronger in many ways. It's not going to include a videotape of Donald Trump killing somebody on Fifth Avenue, but it may include some things that have tax implications or other things. But essentially, it grows out of a non-disclosure agreement and a payoff of $130,000 to a former porn star. That's not the basis on which you stop a man from running for president against somebody in your own party who is the president. It takes a bar that has to be very high before a Democrat who's elected DA on a platform of Get Trump goes after somebody who's running against the head of his party. That needs a high bar. That high bar, I promise you, will not be reached in this indictment, even if it's stronger. And we have to keep our mind open because none of us has seen the indictment. Probably will. It'll probably be leaked, and there probably won't be a criminal investigation of that.
Fair point. Jimmy, put a button on it.
So here's the other thing is the resources are very important. Is this making New York safer? Is this a priority of New York citizens? And he's going to learn either the hard way if he loses the case and he's going to learn that they didn't want the resources to go towards this, especially if he didn't win, he's putting a lot on the line here in this particular case. And it's the New Yorkers that are going to hold him accountable at the end of the day on this thing.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please go to newsnationnow.com, newsnationnow.com, and you can find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button down below. Then you will get more of NewsNation's fact-driven coverage.